I'm really excited because today I'm doing my first wrap-up video. I'm doing a wrap-up of the month of August of all the books I read. This month I read 6 books. I read 2 nonfiction and 4 fiction. So this year my goal was to basically rotate fiction and nonfiction. That's a goal I set I think in January for myself. So I was like, okay, if I read one fiction book, then I have to do nonfiction and keep that pattern going. Over time it's progressed a little bit. So now what I'm doing is I'm gonna always be reading a fiction book, a nonfiction book. And what I do is I read a chapter in the morning and a chapter at night, and then I can read whatever book I would like in between. But I always am going to have a nonfiction going. So with that, I finally finished the Steve Jobs biography written by Walter Isaacson. I started that at the very beginning of June, and it took me 2.5 months to read. It was because of this book I started the 1 chapter a morning and night rule, because at the beginning of June I was working through it, I was reading it every day. It was the only book I was reading, and then I got to a point where I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna reward myself by reading a chapter of the Steve Jobs book with reading a chapter of a fiction book. But then I was reading fiction books and I would just keep reading through the chapters and I wouldn't go back. So anyway, about the Steve Jobs book, I gave that a 5 out of 5. Just because Walter Isaacson, I think, is an amazing writer. So he's a journalist and he has written 2 other biographies. One on an American president or something, I don't know, and then another one on Leonardo da Vinci, if I'm not mistaken. And I really want to read both of them just because the way he, first of all, writes biographies, nonfiction, is not boring. You would think that it would be so boring, but it wasn't. They're just really long, obviously, because he does so much good research. He interviewed so many people for this Steve Jobs book. He went into old online forums, he read old magazine articles, he did so much research, and he just did an amazing job at painting what I think is a real picture of who Steve Jobs was. And I just think his story is interesting, and I love learning about Mac and Apple and how that world was created, and it was kind of inspiring too. So I give that 5 out of 5. I totally recommend it if you want to read a plus 500 page biography. If that's not your style, then don't even try, because there's no point. The second book I read this month was How to Stop Time, which, if you read the synopsis, it sounds so cool. I think the premise is a really great idea, but the story I was a little disappointed with. I only gave the book 3 out of 5. I think I would have preferred, it's one of those stories where it goes past, present, past, present. I would have preferred if it had been just chronological. But it's a really great story idea, and I did like the character, and I did like how fast the story progressed. But I guess the reason I gave it 3 out of 5 is just because it was a little underwhelming, and I think it's a great idea and it could have been a better story. But I don't know, would I recommend someone to read it? Probably not. I mean, I liked it, but I'm not gonna say you have to read this book. That's all I have to say about that one. How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. The third book I read this month was the newest Sophie Kinsella book, Surprise Me, which I gave again a 3 out of 5. It was good, fun, a light, easy Sophie Kinsella read. My all-time favorite book by her is The Undomestic Goddess, and I just thought that was hilarious, and I don't know if one of her books will ever beat that one for me. Surprise Me was good, and it was funny. I liked the little mystery bit it had in it, and it was nice, and it kind of inspired me to live my life the way I want, I guess, because in this story it's all about how this woman and her husband, she's afraid that they are kind of gonna get stuck in a rut eventually. So yeah, it was cute and fun. And then the 4th book, I actually listened to this as an audiobook and I loved it. It's called I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. It's a YA, and I don't typically like YAs that much anymore, but this one was so good. I loved the themes, I loved the way it was written, I loved the characters, I loved the creativity, I loved the art influence, I loved everything about it. Listening to it as an audiobook was really, really good, so I highly recommend that. And just 5 out of 5, probably one of my favorite books of the year. I really, really liked it. I don't wonder what year this was written, because I haven't seen anyone talking about it. I know I got the idea to read it from BookTube, I think from Books and Lala, but she probably read this years ago because it's probably not a new book by any means. But yeah, 5 out of 5 stars, so good. And then the 4th book I read this month. Oh, did I only read? I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh yeah, the 4th book was I'll Give You the Sun. And the 5th book I read was, I reread this book. It's called How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes by Peter Schiff. I read this last fall, and 5 out of 5. If you're new to economics, this is the perfect book for you, because this story is basically an economic story for children. So it starts off very, very simple, and it continues in a very easy to follow way, and you just understand, especially for American economics and how the American economy grew and how the American government influences their economic policies. So it's just so good. It teaches you basic economics in a super easy to understand way, and in a way that you can then explain to other people, and then you could just you can now put ideas together about economy. Economy is really difficult, and no one knows everything about economy, but at least if you have this basis, you're at a good starting point. So 5 out of 5, I recommend for anyone, even someone 12 and up. It's really, really good. And then finally the last book, it was an audiobook I listened to again, Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. And I know this book has an average 4+ rating on Goodreads, but I only gave it a 2 out of 5. I understand why people really love it. I get it. I can see why it can be someone's favorite book, or why they really just loved the story and loved the characters. I didn't like the ending. Let's get that straight. And I liked their love story. I obviously didn't relate to Eleanor at all, and I don't really care for her character. I thought Park was really adorable, so I liked him. But so why did I give it 2 out of 5? I think just because I read I'll Give You the Sun, and as a YA that was so good. And then reading this or listening to this audio book YA right after, it just was not as good. I also I think it's good to have serious themes in young adult, because I'm sure there are a lot of teens going through these difficult situations, and it can be an outlet for them, or it can be something to relate to. But it's hard to tackle these themes when you don't give an explanation as to kind of why. What do I mean by when I say that? Because in my head I'm just thinking why is the mom staying with this man, right? Why is she putting her children through this? And I wish the reader would I wish the author would explain why women stay in abusive relationships, and kind of give a little insight to that, instead of just being yeah, this woman clearly doesn't care about her kids and their well-being, because that's what I get as a reader, thinking and I just wish we kind of had more of the mom's backstory and her reasoning for staying and putting her kids through that. But anyway, just 2 out of 5. I prefer Rainbow Rowell's other book. What's the name? Let me see it if I can find it really quick. All the Bright Places. All the Bright Places is really, really good. Again, another serious theme, but beautiful. I love that book. I give it 4 to 5 stars, that one. Alright, so yeah, that was August, and right at the end of August I'd almost finished 2 books. So September's off to a really good start, because I will be finished 2 books within hopefully the first bit of September. So yay, and stay tuned for more bookish videos that I hope I get to do, and my September wrap up.